Okay, kids. Doing a special Saturday evening version episode of Hawk Droppings. There were a couple of articles that I wanted to go through. Wasn't quite sure where to put them as far as the episodes go, so we're just going to do it as a Hawk Dropping so everybody can hear it. We're going to talk about two things tonight. The Republican Party, their National Ballot Security Task Force. They're trying to get together 100,000 volunteer poll watchers to keep an eye on people who show up to vote on election day. I'm sure that'll be fine. I'm sure they won't constrain that to just black and brown neighborhoods. The second thing, Donald Trump last week gave an interview to Time magazine where he very clearly, very succinctly laid out his agenda for a second term. And it should absolutely scare the shit out of every single one of you, and it should terrify everyone who chews their food with their mouths closed and hasn't reproduced with a close blood relative. Which, recently I've learned that those two groups combined comprise a minority of the population that comprises the American electorate. Who knew? Okay, let's dive in. This first article about the Republican Party's National Ballot Security Task Force. It's an article that came out today by Tom Hartman. His first name spelled Thom, last name Hartmann. Tom Hartman is a guy who I absolutely adore. I love his writing. I love his commentary. I love his insights. You should find him and follow him on all social media platforms. Basically, the starting point for his article is that Republicans, if every eligible voter votes in United States elections, Republicans can't win because demographically, every single policy of the Republican Party, none of them have majority support in the electorate. And so Republicans can only win elections and implement their policies by preventing people from voting and preventing votes from being counted for certain people who did vote. And that campaign is underway right now nationwide by the Republican Party. They've been trying to do it forever. I mean, they've been trying to do this forever. They've been trying to do it throughout the entire history. Conservatives, I'll put it this way, because there was a party switch in the early 60s with the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. They've been doing it forever. I mean, conservatives in this country never wanted black people to be able to vote, didn't want women to be able to vote. And Susan B. Anthony, God bless her, when she got women the right to vote, I think it's important to say that Susan B. Anthony fought for and got the right for white women to vote. She didn't fight for the rights of black women to vote. She fought for the rights of white women to vote. And that's who she got the right to vote for. The rights for black Americans, including black women, to vote in an unfettered manner didn't come about until decades later with the passage of the Civil Rights Act, which was gutted in 2013, I think it was, by John Roberts' Supreme Court. And Republicans have never wanted everybody to vote. And this reminds me of something that I'm going to drop in here. Hang on a second. I thought I had better lighting outside than I actually do. Oh, that's a little better. Whatever. Who gives a shit? We're working on the lighting. We'll figure it out. I can't tell anymore. Whatever, screw it. Um, this all ties into every time you hear a conservative say, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. What they're saying initially is the United States is not a pure democracy, it is a constitutional republic. Well, a constitutional republic is a form of representative democracy. What they are really, truly, and actually saying to you is under a pure democracy, everybody gets a vote and everybody's vote counts the same. What they are saying to you when they say we're not a democracy, we're a republic, is they are explicitly telling you, first of all, that they're racist and they're misogynist. They don't believe that everyone in this country who's an eligible voter should be permitted to vote. And they are telling you that they believe that some people's votes should count more than others. They think the votes of men should count more than the votes of women. They think that the votes of white people should count more than the votes of non-white people. That is exactly and explicitly what they are telling you when they say the United States is not a democracy, it is a republic. That's just reality. And it's weird. You never hear any people on the left or any Democrats say that. It's always people on the right. And, you know, AIPAC and the Zionists and the Republican Party and even members of Democrats in Congress want to paint these student protesters as being anti-Semitic. Weird that, not every Republican is a racist in this country, but every racist and every anti-Semite is a Republican. And you don't see Nazi flags at Democratic events. You see them at Republican events occasionally. You see Confederate flags at Republican events frequently. You don't see them at Democratic events. Again, that's just reality. So again, I mean, it just goes back to the maxim that Republicans can only win by cheating, period. They can only win by cheating because, they're 100% against gun control. Those have 70, 80, 90% approval of the electorate, depending on what the measure is. Abortions is 75 to 80% approval across party lines nationwide. They can't win on that. Any number of issues, Republicans are just fucked. They're fucked because they think that little baby Jesus told them how to govern, and they're going to govern in this, guided by this warped, fucked up version of little baby Jesus Christ, who, hates immigrants and loves corporations and low taxes. And my God, Jesus cares about borders. Anyway, so this has been an ongoing effort by Republicans for years and years and years and years and years. It is dramatically more coordinated now. And these efforts are underway right now ahead of the 2024 election. They're engaging in voter purges, signature challenges, election worker intimidation, and intimidating actual voters themselves at the polls. And this article had a great example going back over 40 years. In the run-up to New Jersey's 1991 gubernatorial election, Republicans in that state put together what they called a National Ballot Security Task Force. They recruited hundreds of off-duty cops and private security guards, armed them with guns, walkie-talkies, and armbands that said task force. And large signs were posted at polling areas in all caps that said, warning, this area is being patrolled by the National Ballot Security Task Force. It is a crime to falsify or to violate election laws. And then it said there's $1,000 reward, yada, yada, yada. Weirdly, in the state of New Jersey in 1981, these groups targeted majority black neighborhoods: Newark, East Orange, Bridgeton, Vinland, and locations throughout Mercer and Atlantic counties. When Black and Hispanic voters showed up to the polls to vote, this was in the days before early voting, task force officers would stop them before they entered the polling place, armed with armbands that said task force, ask them to see their voter registration card and ID. Obviously, the implication of police power was strong. Thousands of voters of color were simply turned away and told that their registrations were no longer valid, and they left. And it worked. The effort was successful enough that it handed victory to the Republican candidate, Thomas Keene, by just shy of 1,800 votes out of 2.3 million votes cast in the race. This election is going to be close, and that's the kind of margin they need. It's not going to take a lot. It is not going to take a lot, and we'll talk more about that in a second. In response, Democrats went to court and got a restraining order that was in place for decades. In 2018, Republicans sued and got that overturned. Now they are free to do this again in the state of New Jersey. The lesson of that experience hasn't been lost on Donald Trump and his campaign. Lola! Sorry. He lost the election of 2020 to Joe Biden by less than 50,000 votes across 5 states when there were more than 155 million votes cast. Arizona, around 10,000 votes. Georgia was 12,000 votes. Wisconsin was around 20,000 votes. It was 0.0005% of the vote. And that's because we have the Electoral College. So anytime you hear somebody say Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, you smack him in the forehead and say no, because 5 million of those votes came from California, 5 million extra votes, 2 million extra votes came from the state of New York. You can take those off the board. It was decided by less than 50,000 votes across 3 states out of more than 155 million votes cast. Trump and his campaign understand this, and they know this. They know. They've either got to flip 100,000 votes, or they've got to keep 100,000 people from showing up at the polls, or they've got to keep 100,000 votes from being counted across 3 or 4 swing states, and that's the ball game. Election attorney Mark Elias keeps pointing out this is a genuine threat to American democracy, and they're not just going after voters, they're going after election workers as well. Nevada, for example, has a law that makes it a felony for anybody to, quote, use or threaten or attempt to use any force, intimidation, coercion, violence, restraint, or undue influence with the intent to interfere with the performance of the duties of any election official relating to an election, or to retaliate against elections officials for performing duties related to an election. Republicans in Nevada have sued to have that law voided. Similarly, in Arizona, the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, hey, that sounds like a fun club. The Arizona Free Enterprise Club, let's get together and have some free enterprise. I'll bet they're a bunch of swingers. They have sued the state to prevent enforcement of the state's election regulations, specifically including rules that say or prevent any activity by any person with the intent or effect of threatening, harassing, or intimidating or coercing voters. Aggressive behavior such as raising one's voice or taunting a voter or poll worker. Using threatening or insulting or offensive language to a voter or a poll worker. Following voters or poll workers coming to or leaving a voting location, including to or from their vehicles. Questioning, photographing, or videotaping voters or poll workers in a harassing or intimidating manner, including when the voter or poll worker is entering or leaving a polling location. The Republican Party has sued, asking for a ruling that would permit them to do all of those things to voters and election workers and poll workers. Don't forget that Maricopa County, the site of the the ballot ninjas, whatever the hell they were called, that did the recount last time and put out all kinds of conspiracy theory bullshit. Maricopa County, during the 2020 election, when Donald Trump was saying stop counting, a whole bunch of armed Trump supporters showed up at the building where the votes were being counted in Maricopa County, Arizona, where Phoenix is located, its most populated county, demanding that they stop counting votes. And those people had guns and Trump flags. Minnesota has a Democracy for the People Act, which makes it a crime to hit voters with materially false statements or impede or prevent another person from exercising their right to vote. So, of course, a right-wing group affiliated with the Minnesota GOP has sued the state to get that law reversed. And Donald Trump has taken over and gutted the RNC. The Washington Post reported, quote, the new leadership at the RNC has discussed a broader effort over the coming months to challenge voter identification and signature verification rules that were put into place for the 2020 election. Quote, the RNC's new posture as it relates to litigation is much more offensive and much less defensive, said Chris LaCivita, who is one of the co-chairs of Donald Trump's 2024 presidential campaign and is now in senior leadership at the RNC. USA Today reported 2 weeks ago, Republicans say they will mobilize more than 100,000 people in battleground states to ensure transparency and fairness in the 2024 election, and an announcement criticized by some as risking potential voter intimidation. That's more than twice the number of votes across 3 or 4 states that gave Joe Biden the 2020 election. 100,000 voter volunteers in swing states. And they're not just looking for your average neighborhood Republican in a business suit with a clean-shaven face. Time magazine reported right-wing extremist groups, including QAnon, Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, militia groups, have all called for a physical presence at polling places and are all volunteering from their ranks to do the same, said former counterintelligence director for the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi. The mobilization has already occurred, he said. The specter of people who are violent in nature and have violent agendas and often come armed with long guns and handguns is becoming a very real possibility. Republicans are also ready for any federal oversight of their nefarious practices. In the 2022 election, the Biden administration tried to place federal election observers in 24 states. Republican secretaries of state in Florida and Missouri blocked them altogether. Expect that to be true in every red state this coming election. In addition to potentially intimidating voters and election officials, Republicans are counting on Democrats to continue to heavily vote via mail while telling Republican voters to always show up in person. They've rolled out a program of election watchers to spot mail-in ballots where the signature deviates even slightly from the one on the voter's registration card. The GOP calls it strict signature matching. Because signatures change over time and often vary a lot when people are in a hurry, this is low-hanging fruit for the GOP. All of the monitors, all they have to do is claim that, in their opinion, a signature doesn't match and the ballot goes into the provisional pile and won't be counted at all until or unless the voter shows up in person at the county elections office to correct whatever needs to be corrected. Most voters will never even know that their ballot was challenged and not counted. I hate these fucking people. Okay. And then they're unregistering millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people across swing states and in other states. So that is what Republicans are doing right now to steal the 2024 election for Donald Trump and the Senate and the House and governorships and state legislatures. So check your voter registration. Check it once a month between now and election day, especially if you are on the left and you live in a red state. Check your voter registration every fucking week and make sure that everybody that you know who's on our side does exactly the same thing. It's critical. It is absolutely critical. They are cheating right now. They are cheating right now, and they are not going to stop. They are not going to stop because they believe they have little baby Jesus on their side, because they believe this is a holy war. They are white Christian nationalists, and they believe this is a fight between good and evil in the biblical sense. Okay. Part 2. Donald Trump gave an interview to Time magazine. I may not even make it through this whole thing because I read this article. I printed it out. It's 10 pages long after I took out all the ads and the photos. It's 10 pages of text. I wanted to throw up after I was done reading it. I just wanted to vomit and barf. It's terrifying. I'm just going to read the first 2 sentences to you. Donald Trump thinks he identified a crucial mistake of his first term. He was too nice. He won't make that mistake again. Brought that up in the context of I think he has like 45 former members of his cabinet, and only 3 or 4 of them are supporting him for re-election, because these are people who worked with him and they saw how incompetent, insane, and what a boob he is. And he was like, I let them quit because I have a heart. I don't want to embarrass anybody. I don't think I'll do that again. In a second term, I'll just fire them. So, what's Trump's vision for a second term? An imperial presidency that would reshape America and its role in the world, to carry out a deportation operation designed to remove more than 11 million people from this country, for which he would be willing to build large migrant detention camps and deploy the U.S. military both at the border and inland in violation of the law. He would let red states monitor women's pregnancies and prosecute those who violate state abortion bans. He would, at his personal discretion, withhold funds appropriated by Congress to states for like law enforcement, things like that, unless those states adopted his policies. He would be willing to fire a U.S. attorney who does not carry out his order to prosecute someone, breaking with a tradition of independent law enforcement that dates from the founding of this country. He's going to pardon every single January 6th insurrectionist, more than 800 of whom have pleaded guilty or been convicted by a jury. He won't come to the aid of an ally an ally who is attacked in Europe or Asia if they weren't paying enough for their own defense. He's going to pull us out of NATO. He would gut the U.S. civil service, deploy the National Guard to American cities as he sees fit, close the White House Pandemic Preparedness Office again, and staff his administration with acolytes who back his false assertion that the 2020 election was stolen. Deep breath. I know that was a lot. Deep breath. Okay. Let's do a deep breath here. Let's get seated. Let's get seated. Let's get them sit bones. Let's get them sit bones situated. Back straight, shoulders back, chest out. Let those arms hang. Get them chakras aligned. All right, here we go. Open up that third eye. There we go. All right, we're going to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, I think it is. Yeah. All right, deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. There we go. One more. Because otherwise, and shake it out. That's our PTSD regulation, self-regulation of our nervous system. Shake it out. Move your arms. Move your arms. That's right. Because otherwise, I'm going to lose my fucking mind and punch one of my monitors. There we go. Okay. Now that we did that, I'm going to skip some of the stuff. I mean, he's going to. There was one. Well, there were a couple paragraphs. So the guy who did this interview and wrote this article, Eric Cortellessa from Time Magazine, who did an excellent job with this. His writing is brilliant. This interview is 10 pages of text, and there's not an ounce of fat on this writing. It's very good writing. It's a very good article. It's just fucking terrifying. He paints a scene. Trump steps onto the patio at Mar-a-Lago near dusk. The well-heeled crowd eating Wagyu steaks and grilled Bronzino pauses to applaud as he takes his seat. On this gorgeous evening, the club is a MAGA mecca. At the moment, though, Trump's attention is elsewhere. With an index finger, he swipes through an iPad on the table to curate the restaurant's soundtrack. The playlist veers from Sinead O'Connor to James Brown to Phantom of the Opera. And there's a uniquely Trump choice, a rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner sung by a choir of defendants imprisoned for attacking the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, interspersed with a recording of Trump reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Excuse me. I just had to vomit. I call them J6 Patriots when I ask if he's going to pardon them. Yes, absolutely. Fuck that guy. There was another paragraph that I wanted to read about what is also happening right now. I put it this way. I highly recommend that everybody just go read this article for yourselves. It's worth it to read it to yourselves, for yourselves. It's terrifying. It's nauseating. But this is what he's going to do. This is what he's going to do if he gets reelected. And this paragraph that I wanted to read shows the support that he has right now. The thousands of people who are working on this right now, 6 months before Election Day. Policy groups are creating a government in waiting full of true believers. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 has drawn up plans for legislative and executive orders as it trains prospective personnel for a second Trump term. They're drafting executive orders right now for him to sign on day one. They are training over 50,000 people to staff the executive branch across all departments and agencies because Donald Trump is going to fire that many bureaucrats on day one and replace them with maggots. The Center for Renewing America, led by Russell Vought, who is a white Christian nationalist whack job, Trump's former director of the Office of Management and Budget, is dedicated to disempowering the so-called administrative state, the collection of bureaucrats with the power to control everything from drug safety determinations to the contents of school lunches. The America First Policy Institute is a research haven of pro-Trump right-wing populists. America First Legal, led by Trump's immigration advisor Stephen Miller, Nosferatu, is mounting court battles against the Biden administration right now. The goal of these groups is to put Trump's vision into action on day one. The president never had a policy process that was designed to give him what he actually wanted and campaigned on, says Vaught. We are sorting through the legal authorities and the mechanics and providing the momentum for a future administration. That includes a litany of boundary-pushing right-wing policies, including slashing Department of Justice funding and cutting climate environmental regulations. It's okay. But his policy preoccupations are clear and consistent. If Trump is able to carry out a fraction of his goals, the impact could prove as transformative as any presidency in more than a century. He's in full war mode, says his former advisor and occasional confidant and bathtub meth impresario Steve Bannon. Trump's sense of the state of the country is quite apocalyptic, Bannon says. That's where Trump's heart is. That's where his obsession is. These obsessions could once again push the nation to the brink of crisis. Trump does not dismiss the possibility of political violence around the election in 2024. If he wins, it's fair. If he loses, it's unfair, and the Democrats cheated and stole it, and he's going to tell his supporters to get violent again. Fortunately, he did that last time. His supporters went along with that last time, and now almost 2,000 of them have been arrested, and over 800 of them are in prison. So, just Google Trump Time Magazine interview. Read the whole interview. It's important that we be informed. It's important that we understand what he's going to do. It's important because we're going to have conversations with people who are like, whatever, I'm going to vote for Trump. It's important that we be informed and prepared to have conversations with those people to scare the ever-loving fuck out of them, to hopefully convince them to either A, vote for Biden, or B, vote for RFK Jr., or C, stay home and not vote at all. The next 6 months are going to suck. And even if Joe Biden wins, the next 6 months after that are going to suck too, because Donald Trump will never concede defeat. His supporters will never say that he lost. All of them will say that the election was stolen. On the other hand, he could win. And if he wins, he's going to implement this shit on day one. If he wins, he's going to sign 50 executive orders on his first day in office. And they're all going to be awful. So, on that note, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Saturday night. I just wanted to hop in and highlight these two articles for everybody. And please enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm going to go try to continue training my dogs not to bark at the neighbors. Everybody have a great night. I'll see you.